Welcome to Live.Laugh Launch, the go-to-market podcast for everyone who brings products to life. I'm Katie Moss, and whether you're leading strategy, building campaigns, designing experiences, or figuring out how all the pieces fit together, this show is for you. We explore every angle of go-to-market success, from the big picture thinking to the nitty-gritty execution. Each episode dives into what really works, what doesn't, and how cross-functional teams collaborate to turn ideas into market wins. If you're in marketing, building a startup, or just fascinated by how great products find their audience, you're in the right place. Let's launch into it. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode, Season 2 of Live.Laugh Launch. Today, I have with me Cameron Pearce. Cameron has over 3 decades of experience in the video industry. He's a masterful storyteller and an award-winning executive producer. He founded and leads Cross-Tier Creative, a specialized creative agency that delivers exceptional videos and designs for clients across various sectors and platforms. His portfolio includes branded content, promotional materials, and a myriad of digital assets for a diverse client list, including HP, Comcast, Netflix, and the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Cameron is driven by a mission to forge genuine emotional connections with viewers and ignite brand stories with a touch of magic. So thank you for joining us today, Cameron.
Thank you for having me.
Cameron, super excited to have you here. We've known each other for many years now, across many companies, so I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about.
Absolutely. It's been a great journey starting on your ascent to marketing.
That is a bold claim, sir, but thank you very much. Appreciate that.
My bio had some bold claims in it.
Yeah, but those were all substantiated. I didn't even read out all of your awards, but there were many of them.
Masterful, maybe, we'll see. Yet to be determined.
Yeah, so our audience may be wondering, why is a video guy here talking about go-to-market? But I actually think your role in go-to-market is super interesting. We've worked together on a lot of different types of content around product marketing and within my product marketing roles. And so I'd love to just talk about kind of how you get involved there. So when you look at product launches today, why do you think video has become such a critical piece of go-to-market?
I mean, it's what we gravitate towards. It's like we're more kind of in tune to watch a video than to read a text. I saw one stat that said 17 hours of video is consumed per week. And then the retention rate on top of that is way higher than text as well. So you have they say 95% retention rate or 10%, for text. So it really does make a big difference and definitely should be a part of all your marketing and all your go-to-market strategies.
Yeah. And I think sometimes it can be kind of relegated to the creative part of marketing instead of the campaign side of things, and not necessarily thought about as much on the kind of product or product marketing side outside of demos. So I think that's really interesting. How do you decide which type of video best supports a product launch?
Well, it's tied into everything. It's tied into what the product is. Is it a physical product? Is it a SaaS? Is it, a service? And then what are the expectations? What are we trying to achieve? Is it just more awareness? Is it introducing something to a new potential client? Or is it brand awareness? All the things really factor into what kind of video you make. And that kind of goes back to, what you were saying about getting video, the creative agency who's doing the production part of it, getting them involved early. Because then we kind of understand the process, understand who it's for, the why, and then the how will come naturally, usually.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. So when do you like to get involved in the process? I know even with us two working together across different businesses, it's been at different points. Do you guys like to get involved at the very, very beginning? Do you like to do the scripting? What does that preferred flow look like?
Yeah, I mean, I like being involved as early as possible, even before maybe even video is thought of.
Yeah.
Because I think the more time you have to develop it and to work with it, the better results you get. And also on deciding kind of what to do, is it motion graphics? Is it live action? getting involved early can help drive those decisions in terms of like the allocated budgets with the quality, with the expectations not only come, but mostly will really be the result of getting involved early and understanding, where everybody's coming from, the stakeholders, yourself, CEO, whoever, and trying to make all those things sort of match, in one cohesive interaction and partnership.
Yeah. Speaking of expectations, and I did not put this on your prep list, but just spilling some tea now. Have you ever told a client no because the video was a terrible idea?
I always try and polish a turd if I have to. That's the old saying is you try and polish a turd. You certainly don't want to, but the more involved you are early in the process, it's like we're all creatives and we want to feel like we're a partner. And so the earlier involved we are in the process, the more likely, some of those ideas are going to translate further down the pipeline, and we're going to want to make a better product. You have more agency in the process when you're involved early, but I certainly enjoy the ones where it is across the board, unilaterally, we're all in lockstep and trying to make a good product and be a good service to, the vendor and the partners and everybody else to make sure that it lands. The last thing you want to do, all the money's in the production and the content. And if that doesn't land, if you're not sort of aligned at every step, that's why we love storyboards and making sure that everything is unified and really ties back to whatever the core message is. It's like you can get distracted with the bells and whistles of the product. Maybe people who made it really want to dial in on one particular thing, but depending on the format and the duration and the channels, you really need to make sure that it's specific for those, but then also trying to support that more, the global story, the story you're trying to tell to sell the product or the service.
Yeah, that's a great segue for my next question, which is around storytelling. And across your creative, your agency's tagline is where stories connect. What, in your opinion, makes a video story actually connect with an audience?
It's the human thing, right? We're all humans. No one wants to get sold to, per se. The hard sells, stopped working about 15 years ago, probably. A lot of things go into the human connection, right? There's authenticity. That's a big part of it. That kind of goes back to the hard sell or the fake scenario. If you sniff anything that's sort of fake or disingenuous about a video, you're already at a loss. And that breeds trust, right? So authenticity will breed trust in the brand. And then being relatable. Don't talk to the masses, try and talk to an individual and sort of position, whatever you're trying to do, you position a problem and we've got the solution, And so if you make it relatable to the person, sometimes you'll even do like a thing where you take a protagonist and have it be like from their perspective so that the viewer can then sort of imagine that and then they see the value that they can get from the product. Emotion, values, all those things trigger results. And that's kind of what we're trying to do. If you can tell a story or be a little bit entertaining, I think there's always a fun little, I have a cousin, he's one of our art directors, and he likes to put a little wink in everything. And that's not an actual wink, but there's sort of like at the end of a spot, like in the old spots where there would be like a, ding and the little thing would spin. It's almost like that where there's a little bit of just to try to tell the audience that there's somebody playful behind this,
How have you seen that gradual switch to more authentic videos affect the kind of videos that you're creating? Obviously on social today, we see like people filming themselves and on their phones and things like that. Has that changed how you guys are doing business or putting videos together today?
Yeah. Everybody has a phone, with a camera. And so my favorite camera is the one I have on me, it's sort of a fun little thing. But like, because there's so much content, the content that is then geared towards selling a product has to be then even more curated because we're all used to seeing all these things. And then sometimes, the viral video hits and it's got, almost zero production value besides being at the right place at the right time and having that authentic, connection. But it's definitely changed everything. Between all the different online resources for content, you're really, really battling for people's eyes and their attention. And so it becomes harder to keep that and to maintain it unless, you're just doing it for fun. But even if you're doing it for fun, oftentimes you're trying to monetize it because it's a passion. But yeah, no, it's definitely changed the landscape of everything. You have to be much more curated and nimble is one way to laser focused, but did not appear laser focused, did not appear like you're selling. So yeah, it's created a sort of a gray area of nuance that we like to sort of live in and propagate and then, hopefully you learn from each one. Sometimes like an explainer video is more like a pilot because you're trying to test the market and figure out what it's going to do. And then maybe more content then comes after that.
Another switch that, has impacted every single industry and video as well is AI. How are you approaching AI and video?
As often as I can, because it is for sure on the uptick. I mean, it's amazing what you can get away with. Now, they're still not good with hands yet. Hands look weird and fingers get generated. And in my humble opinion, the people talking on camera, you can still tell it's AI.
Yeah.
But two things you can do with AI. First, it's the mix and match method. There's not one solution right now this will do it all. There's like the top best voiceover, generator from text. There's like the top video thing. It's amazing what you can do with high quality video, voiceover, and then custom graphics at the end. So, somebody like me with the natural skill set to do all this stuff, you can get a bunch of different shots. You can actually get them to look very similar, but then in editing software, I can blend them so they really look like, they're an actual production. And then as long as you don't show anybody talking, which is the biggest tell, at least, today. I mean, it changes, every new model could come out tomorrow and it's like seamless. You can really, and then you pull off like a polished logo at the end, some kind of just simple animation. With those two things blending, you can really pull off, what could be, maybe it's not a national spot, but it would look amazing on your phone, stuff like that. The tools are there. And we definitely see it coming in fast. So it's best to embrace it.
Yeah.
But leverage it. It always needs the human story, the human creativity, but human stories with AI assets equals very low budgets. And pretty much infinite creativity. I mean, I've almost canceled all of my
faster time and all
faster. You can imagine anything. There's no difference between doing a production on the moon versus doing it, next door anymore. And the quality is almost there. That if you can get that final finisher to really tune it up, it's pretty dang impressive and scary and fun.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's really interesting about like just thinking about B-roll and locations and things like that and being able to simulate that and not having to travel. And I think that actually offers up more options for creativity most people don't have the budget to like go on site in Paris or something, but like with AI, they can be at the Eiffel Tower tomorrow or appear that they're in the city. And so that like just gives more opportunities for more settings when you're storytelling. And so, yeah, I think in that way, it's like not killing creativity. Creativity is actually opening up more opportunities.
Exactly. For sure. AI became popularized because of when we were able to speak to it in our own language and vernacular and not coding, right? That's when it AI's existed before we know it in the past few years. But, then it becomes, then it's all about the prompting. So I did an AI deep dive this summer and it was all about learning how to prompt. And it's a big deal to know how to prompt it, and then once you figure out the prompting, say, hey, can you generate these prompts for another AI? I'm always the mix and match method where I'm using one AI to either, check the hallucinations of another AI or these prompts for, that AI. But if the prompting then is really what's generating all the creativity, then I have a fun little saying that I've made the banner image on my LinkedIn profile, which is intention is the universal interface. So what you're intending to do is essentially the prompt, and whatever your intentions are, that's what you can create. So it's given the power, just almost a national commercial spot, basically in the hands of people like me that love these tools and want to figure out how to way to utilize them,
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I was laughing because my favorite question recently to AI is, did you make these stats up?
Yeah.
And usually it's yes. So
it tells on itself. It's like, actually totally.
Yeah, every time I'm like, stop doing that. Anyway.
And that's some of the next generations are going to come out where they're like, don't give an answer unless you know that it's true.
Yeah.
The one thing that a lot of people aren't doing is using like the deep research method. Maybe not the deep think, because that'll be like a white paper, but like a deep research, really will scrub the web and do more very specific things. And it's not dependent on the latest model for its information. Some of the AI, you can't ask it what the weather is like today because it wasn't updated.
It doesn't have time.
Yeah.
Perception either.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, even like ChatGPT has an agent mode, and it opens up a little virtual desktop, and you see it, and you see what it does, and it tells you what it's doing and why it's doing it, and it's scrubbing these 20 websites, and you get to see it, which was, I think, a fun little addition. Makes you really feel like you're getting your $20 a month worth or whatever.
Awesome. We went on a little tangent, but I wanted to hear all about sort of the trends that were happening. Let's go back to sort of working with product marketers, since that's why a lot of our audience comes here. So
AI tangent.
Hey, product marketers care about AI too, right?
Yeah, it's coming.
So when you're working with product marketers, how do you translate product positioning and differentiators into a visual story that's still simple, easy to understand, and engaging? So this is combating what you were saying earlier. You know, if you're working with product managers and they're like very in the weeds, how do you elevate and tell a story?
I mean, you just try and simplify, if you were to pick, but we want all the information. We want all the little 5, things that you're trying to get across in this one video, but it really does come down to the core message. What's the one thing you want the viewers to take away, to walk away with? It's the meaning of the differentiator, not just the facts in it. So you're showing, you're not telling.
Right.
If you've got, a little thing you're trying to talk about, maybe you don't show the actual UI. You take motion graphics and take a complex thought and simplify it, distill it. So you get that one thought, and then, which is the core thing along the way. But every video has a purpose. Some videos are just like, we're just going to get things started and just brand, or it's like more evolving, the product. We want you to keep using it, or we're going to tell you about this new feature. Each video is going to be a little bit different, but it's still usually about distilling it down.
Yeah, it's interesting you say show, don't tell, because that's actually advice that writers, including myself, have been given as well. So it's interesting that it translates to video. Awesome. So you often come into projects later than you would like. Product marketers or the business already has sort of messaging frameworks, go-to-market plans, very specific ideas. What is the best way that teams can set up video for success if they want to do a lot of the work upfront themselves?
Yeah, I think, obviously the preferred thing is to be involved early, but if not, then we're coming in receiving probably a creative brief, that sort of outlines the things that we might have missed in those first couple stages. All the basic stuff, which you're trying to get across, the target audience, what kind of tone and branding, all the brand guidelines, of course, how the video is going to be used, the objectives, creative brief that's basically sort of summarizing everything we talked about that we would normally glean from early meetings, trying to figure out, what video to make. You could share customer insights and research. Yeah, just align on just a brief that's going to align all the production teams. So then that also drives how we view its success. Did we achieve these things? Did we, whatever the preferred results are, did we actually pull it off? And so all that could be in that creative brief that really does help anchor everything, so then we can refer back to it often, and then hopefully make a video that's just as good as if we were involved from the very beginning.
Yeah. Where do you see, potential misalignment there? Product marketing video aren't fully clicking yet.
It's basically usually trying to cram too much into something, or trying to do like a one size fits all approach, or you're trying to make it appeal to too
too broad or too narrow.
Yeah, of people. Then it gets watered down, and then it, isn't really good for anybody.
In B2B marketing, we have a tendency to roll out corporate things despite ourselves, corporate messaging and corporate ways of making creative and things like that. So I also wonder if maybe working with you guys or, an agency that has a larger creative vision can be helpful in that way to get you out of that sort of narrow, very corporate B2B. So if you could give one piece of advice to product marketers about how to integrate video earlier in the go-to-market process or in the product launch process, what would that be?
Just make sure it's not an afterthought, is really the main thing. Think about video from the beginning, because you're going to use it. How are we going to leverage it? And that's why us being involved early helps. Sure that the storytelling is aligned with the message, across all the channels. That's pretty important. The earlier you can integrate video and thinking about repurposing it for the multi-channel from the start. So you can, one really good tool too is if you're going on a shoot or something, get the core message that is the intended part, but then a lot of the social channels want something more, candid. So you can actually just shoot the same message for different purposes. Don't think about just the main message. Also think about not just getting shorter snippets of it, but it's got a different tone. And it can have a different camera or whatever, if you're talking production. Yeah, but the earlier you start thinking about it, the better.
It's definitely good advice to think about all of those channels that you might need later on as part of that go-to-market plan from the very beginning, because you guys aren't going to go back on location probably to shoot more content. So you got what you got.
That's right. And not thinking about it in post-production, not thinking about, oh, wait, how do we repurpose this? But get them to say those little short form, highly, consolidated sound bites or whatever. And like I was saying, do it with a selfie, or another camera, and it kind of comes across more genuine. Reflexivity. If I'm not touting, intention is the new universal interface. It's my previous thing was reflexivity. I like it when there's some reflexivity, meaning that you're making the audience aware of the medium. Right. So back to AI real quick. Heinz has a really good example of this where they're using AI content, but they're reflexive about how they've presented it. So it looks like a commercial, and it's like they pose the question, we submitted, what does Heinz mean to you or whatever in an image, or make a Heinz bottle to AI. And then it just cycled through all the iterations with like cool static and stuff like that. So it was a really good use case of using AI, not as like, oh, hey, this is supposed to be a national spot, but like, reflexively using it in a really fun way that was very playful. And it just kind of one of those brand awareness things where, it's an emotive thing and people connect to that stuff. And if it was entertaining, maybe I am more likely to grab. So that paradigm is definitely shifting. They're already using it in a reflexive way. And then when the AI gets, which is kind of the best use case, either reflexive or parody. It really be really good with AI. And AI is so good with something specific that you haven't seen, doing some pattern or design or having cave drawings animate. It's really good at that because it's like that fine line of, it's not the Polar Express, that movie that had poor animation results, but it pulls it off because it's something that your brain hasn't seen. So it's more believable. And I keep going on AI tangents.
No, that's fine. That's where we are today. For sure. Actually, I'm sure folks would be interested in like, what are your favorite AI video tools to use?
Well, VO3, is kind of the top dog. It's pretty pricey. You get a half off discount first couple of months. Yeah, that's the main one. Runway ML is really interesting. That you can take like, a shot of, say there's a person looking out a window and you're kind of outside getting a profile of them. You can have Runway ML just say, hey, make other shots from this scene. And it'll do a shot from the inside of the room, blah, blah, blah. It can change the weather. Runway ML and VO3, those combined are pretty big. Kling is another big one. And that's not a AI wrapper, but you do need to but often these companies that are including multiple AIs, those are called AI wrappers, where they don't have their own AI. They're just utilizing, and they're usually older models, because they're the companies that have made these AI, the big three, which is Gemini, Chat, and Claude. They make these models and then they want to tout the latest models on their websites. But then usually for the older models to make money, they'll license them out to wrapper companies that will, utilize them, and it's still good. But that's why I was sort of saying the mix and match method is still best, where you get the best quality, go to the source, go to the best video, and then you can parse them together and make something, very bespoke, because it's not a piece of stock footage that anybody else can buy. In fact, I've canceled most of my stock memberships. Suno, you can create music. 11 Labs for voice, and then VO3, Runway ML, and Kling for video, and then all three of the main text. And then I guess Nano Banana is a pretty good one for imaging with Google, with Gemini. That's like, product placement. You can have it do product. And one way to get consistency in video is to create all the stills that have the same look, and then put those stills, make the video, and you can get even longer than 8 seconds of video if you take the last frame of the last video and then upload. So, there's a bunch of little tricks you can do to I'm giving away all my secrets, which are, there's like a zillion tutorials on LinkedIn.
It's the point of a podcast, Cameron.
That's right. Yeah. With the right mix and match and in and out and a little bit of ingenuity and research, you can get long shots that do amazing things. And then if there's a human involved, in the mix and match method, which it currently is, you get good results.
Awesome.
Or you just do the reflexive route, and have bad AI that you still have to package, but it's still cheaper than creating it all from scratch.
All right. Well, before we wrap, I would love to talk to you a little bit about metrics. How do you decide if a video launch worked? Like, what KPIs matter most? Is it engagement, conversions? What does that typically look like in your mind?
Yeah, the KPIs always vary depending on kind of what you're looking for. There's views and impressions. The impressions are like you saw it, and the view is you actually watched it. If the goal is to a broad reach, then those are probably more important. The awareness part,
brand awareness,
blah blah blah. Engagement metrics is kind of a different thing. That's like sharing and commenting and liking. How much of the video, did they watch? And that's actually usually more telling than just views and anything else. Because if you share it or like or engage, all those things, that carries a bigger weight. And then, really, did they click through? Did they do anything? Did the call to action work? Was there an action after the call to action? And it could be anything from going to a website to filling out a form to requesting a demo. All those things are big checkbox for that was awesome because the video worked. They did the thing that we were hoping that they would do. And so to gauge that, you use all those things. And then it's even conversations like, sometimes maybe there's not like a direct metric per se, or maybe there's not a direct sale, but the salespeople are talking about how much time it saved them, or like they use this video or the CEO plays it at the event all the time. So things like that are also, important to consider, because if it saves time for the company and just makes it easy to explain this complex thing, then it's definitely a win. So yeah, not everything is numbers. And a lot of times it's not a quantitative result, but the KPIs need to align with the purpose of the video for sure.
I think it can be tricky, especially if you're spending like a large amount of your budget on video, and a lot of your brand awareness is hard to measure is what I'm getting to, right. As we know, especially on like social and things like that. So I would be interested to hear how like different folks are measuring that for video, especially in this more authentic video era. Like, does that look different now? So if you have a founder doing, promoted video posts on LinkedIn, is it now like how many connections he makes, and like, do you actually tie that to leads? I don't know. Yeah. There's a lot of things you can look at now.
Yeah, some of it is there is certainly something to be said for putting a lot of money into a project or a budget, and you do expect more results from that. But it's just now kind of different. It's parsed out. It's across a broader spectrum, and you can certainly quantify a large part of it, but then there's the part that you can't quantify, is kind of growing, and that's you assume that if they got to the end of the video that they were engaged and that you increased your brand awareness, but they may have just walked away, or left, or like forgot to hit stop, or it's in some other tab. So even some of that stuff is really hard to directly correlate to success, but ultimately I think you're going to find out, and the sharing is huge, the liking is huge, commenting in particular, if you can engage somebody or just generate some kind of pathos, generate some kind of emotion, and those are the ones that they'll share, or they're a little funny or something, if the product or the client calls for it, if it makes sense.
All right, I'll ask you if you have a hot take on this. If you could change one thing about how B2B companies approach video today, what shift would you want to see?
I mean, the magic wand approach is like, storytelling. It's like the real estate thing with location, and just the creativity behind it. I think you really have to think hard about what the messaging is, and how best to really connect with people. We gotta tell stories. Either they're short form stories. On social platforms, you've literally got 2 seconds, to get the hook in there and to get them interested. And it could be stepping outside of your comfort zone a little bit, just like you were talking about, with all your stakeholders. Sometimes you kind of want to be more, cinematic, emotionally resonant, maybe not parsing out all the details, holding back on some of the things that, well, everybody needs to think that their part is, every part of the product is important. But, the social kind of is like the top of the funnel, that's like the tease to get to maybe the middle of the funnel is like the explainer, and then the bottom of the funnel is like the demo. So really trying to figure out, how to get the customer all the way from the tease to the meat. It's like a meal, it's like a snack. Then you get the main course, and then maybe the dessert is the demo, and then they, are going to get engaged. And
yeah, that's interesting because like people don't always think about doing that specific journey for video. So video may be part of a larger content strategy, but it's not necessarily like you have video at every stage. So I like thinking about it like that, and maybe having a strategy around that full journey through video specifically.
Yeah.
Instead of just having like a demo at the end or something, right? So how are we telling this story from the very beginning of awareness all the way to purchase through video?
Yep. Leveraging all the different formats, durations, tones, all those things, trying to keep the audience as the hero in the story, not the product itself. And it'll all those things will naturally lead to better videos. But the quality storytelling is probably first, and product details second. It's like the whole Apple approach, it's like the high concept, the pathos, and that usually will drive everything else.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining, Cameron. Super happy to have you here, and
it's awesome.
Looking forward to doing more work together.
It's awesome hanging out.
Yeah.
This is like a long, one of our normal meetings. Just a longer version, more in depth.
Exactly.
And more fun. We laughed.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, thank you. And thanks everyone for joining.